started. Number one, the U.S. says that Brittney Griner was wrongfully arrested by Russian law enforcement when she was trying to come back home from Russia a couple months ago. She was found with cannabis filters in her luggage, and then they had arrested her, and she has been there ever since. Wanted to ask you, Bridgette, is this technically true?
Okay, so let's just go back to that. So she was arrested. She had what's called marijuana concentrate that was in her luggage. And when we go to other places, especially other countries, I mean, even in the United States, right, we have to be mindful of what the laws are when we're visiting another place. Right. And so there in Russia, their laws are that is illegal to have that in Russia, right? She was not wrongfully arrested. She was arrested based off of the charge for having marijuana concentrate, of which she actually pled guilty to, right? She agreed to plead guilty to that offense. And so later on, she was sentenced to 9 years after she voluntarily pled guilty to that charge.
Gotcha. Understood. And in the follow-up of that conviction, Senator Colin Allred from Texas, actually from this district, he stated on CNN last week that despite the terrible news of her judgment, it is actually a good thing that this happened expeditiously. I believe that he mentioned something about typically it could take almost up to a year, for the actual conviction to happen. Right. So he said because it is a good thing because now they can discuss negotiations. Can you give me your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's definitely something that works out in her favor for the negotiations process. As we saw as recently as yesterday, Russia has agreed to begin negotiations for a prisoner swap, right? And so the reason why he said that was because she had to actually become a prisoner before they could entertain the discussion of having a prisoner swap, right? Previously, before that, she was being held until they had a sentencing trial, kind of like what we have here in the United States when someone's being held on bond until they go to trial, right? Kind of a similar process. So she had to become a prisoner first, and then they can entertain the discussions of negotiations to have a prisoner swap, which is what actually has began already.
Gotcha. And then as a legal expert, can you give us any insight just as to what her chances are? Does she have a chance to be released? I know we're not experts on Russian, law enforcement trials, but just based on, I would like to think that there's not a whole lot of negotiations going on of this magnitude all the time, right?
Right. I mean, well, the United States enters into agreements with other countries for prisoner swaps, often, right? All the time, right? And so it's just a matter of having a discussion, negotiations with our leaders and the other countries' foreign ministers, right? And they come to some type of agreement. But to answer your question, what is the likelihood of her being released? I would say the chances are pretty good because, again, as of yesterday, we were informed that Russia has now agreed to entertain negotiations. So prior to that, we had no idea, but they confirmed yesterday that they are entertaining that. So I think those chances are pretty good for her.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for that insight. And I know that this kind of had got a lot of people divided on this topic. So I was really looking for, even for myself, clarification as to what really happened, what her chances are. Because again, even though she did technically break the law, as you discussed earlier, I would hate to see somebody stay in jail for just something that is not hurting anybody. You know what I mean? It's just kind of minute. That's just my personal feelings. I'm just throwing it out.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, because the thing is, it's just like when we talk about, does the punishment fit the crime, right? And so that's really what it is. Even here in the United States, here in Texas, for possession of marijuana, even at, let's say, the Class B level. At the Class B level, that's the smallest kind of amount, less than 2 ounces, right? We are, the punishment range can be anywhere up to 6 months in the county jail. Now, do we say 6 months for, less than 2 ounces? No. Again, does the punishment fit the crime? And so that's really what the concern is here and why I think people are so outraged.